If necessary, I will not hesitate to shut the electricity off completely. That wasn't a threat from Moscow or Beijing, it was a direct warning from Ontario, Canada, just hours after the US slapped a 50% tariff on Canadian steel and aluminum. Then came the retaliatory blow, a 25% surcharge on electricity flowing into Michigan, Minnesota, and New York. From the Detroit auto plants to the New York data centers, the signal was deafening. Canada wasn't bluffing. And when Mark Carney took office as Canada's Prime Minister, he didn't just keep the door closed, he bolted it shut. So what happens when America picks a trade war with its own power supply? For decades, the United States and Canada have shared more than just a border. They've shared the wires. Power grids, supply chains, and trade routes have long crossed seamlessly between the two nations, forming one of the most interdependent economic relationships on the planet. Nowhere was this connection more visible, or more vital, than in energy. Canada exported billions of kilowatt-hours of electricity south each year, powering American homes, factories, and digital infrastructure. In return, US dollars flowed north, fueling jobs and stability in Canadian provinces like Ontario, Quebec, and Manitoba. For most of the 21st century, it was a symbiotic relationship built on trust, cooperation, and mutual gain. But cracks began to show. Under pressure to revive domestic manufacturing and appeal to Rust Belt voters, President Donald Trump reemerged on the political scene in early 2025 with a hardline economic agenda. Touting slogans of Made in America and Bring Back Steel, his administration targeted what it called imbalanced trade dependencies. Canada, ironically the U.S.'s closest ally, was first in line. On February 1st, Trump's White House imposed sweeping tariffs, 25% on all goods imported from Canada, and 10% specifically on energy exports. The message was clear. If the U.S. was going to reindustrialize, it would do so without relying on foreign, even friendly, powers. By March 12th, the pressure escalated further, a targeted 25% tariff on Canadian steel and aluminum. And then, on June 4th, a thunderclap, that tariff doubled to 50%. This wasn't just trade policy, it was economic warfare waged with spreadsheets and executive orders. And in Canada's government halls and energy control rooms, it sparked a response, one that would rattle North America's electrical spine and rewrite the rules of cooperation. On February 1st, 2025, the Trump administration launched what would become a seismic shift in North American trade relations. With a single executive order, the White House imposed a 25% tariff on nearly all Canadian imports, from construction materials to agricultural goods. But the headline grabber was the 10% energy tariff, a move that hit Canada where it mattered most, its role as America's top foreign energy supplier. Just over a month later, on March 12th, the administration escalated further. Claiming national security and industrial independence, it implemented an additional 25% tariff specifically targeting Canadian steel and aluminum, two pillars of North America's tightly integrated manufacturing backbone. These were not isolated strikes. The tariffs were timed and calibrated to apply maximum pressure ahead of U.S. elections and to send a clear message to American voters. Donald Trump was ready to decouple from foreign dependencies, even if they came from the friendliest of neighbors. The strategy, publicly described as economic rebalancing, internally bore a more aggressive nickname, Operation Steel Spine. According to leaks from inside the Commerce Department, Trump's team had modeled a scenario where forcing Canada to absorb the cost of tariffs would lead to a renegotiation of energy export contracts and a rerouting of supply chains into U.S. states like Ohio and Pennsylvania. The plan included targeted media blitzes in the Rust Belt and visits to struggling plants with staged job announcements. But the math didn't lie. Within 2 weeks of implementation, the price of U.S.-produced steel shot from $700 per ton to nearly $900. Mid-size manufacturers began filing cost adjustments. The automotive sector, especially in Michigan, reported a 6 to 8% increase in production costs. In Minneapolis and Buffalo, local officials flagged budgetary strains on infrastructure projects tied to Canadian aluminum. Still, the White House pushed forward. By June 4th, the tariff on Canadian steel and aluminum was doubled, a staggering 50% surcharge overnight. That same day, President Trump declared in a rally, "We're taking our industry back. No more free rides, no more dependence on Canadian power." Ironically, it was that very phrase, Canadian power, that would trigger the most unexpected retaliation. Canada's response was swift and electrifying. On March 10th, just 2 days before Trump's 25% metals tariff took effect, Ontario Premier Doug Ford made a rare primetime appearance to announce a retaliatory measure, a 25% surcharge on all electricity exports to the United States. With calm resolve, he declared, "We will not stand idly by while Canadian industry is punished. If America wants to play hardball, they'll have to pay for the lights." Ontario supplies electricity to major parts of the U.S. grid, particularly in states like Michigan, Minnesota, and New York, regions that have no rapid substitutes for Canadian hydroelectric and nuclear energy. The move, while framed as a temporary surcharge, hit like a thunderclap across energy markets. Power operators began recalculating costs. Within 24 hours, forward contracts for cross-border electricity spiked by 18%. Behind the scenes, officials in Ottawa had long prepared for this scenario. Mark Carney, the former Bank of England governor and a man known for his icy discipline, had just assumed the office of Prime Minister on March 14th. Though the surcharge was technically announced before he took office, Carney immediately embraced the move as a calculated show of force. His message was simple: electricity is not just a commodity, it's leverage. Though the surcharge was suspended just 1 day after its announcement, following an emergency negotiation between Ford and U.S. Trade Secretary Howard Lutnick, the threat had already landed. American households in northern states were left wondering what their next bill might look like. Businesses operating cold storage and data centers were now calculating new risk premiums. Canada, for decades viewed as the quiet, reliable partner in the room, had made it clear it was done playing nice. More significantly, Carney's administration shifted strategic focus. In late March, Canada re-entered negotiations with the EU on an expanded energy cooperation deal. In April, trade envoys were sent to Jakarta and Hanoi. By May, Ottawa had finalized memorandums of understanding with Japan and South Korea to expand LNG and hydro exports. It was a pivot toward Asia and away from reliance on the United States. Carney's team framed this as a trade firewall designed to protect Canada from future American volatility. If Trump wants to politicize the grid, one aide told the Financial Times, then we'll just sell our power elsewhere. It was a quiet revolution, one grounded not in rhetoric but in spreadsheets, shipping manifests, and kilowatt hours. By June 2025, the two sides found themselves staring into a stalemate. The U.S. had not rolled back its tariffs. Canada had suspended its energy surcharge but kept the option firmly on the table. Mark Carney, though not a bombastic speaker, made repeated references to a long-term reconfiguration of Canadian trade, which insiders took as code for permanent detachment from U.S. energy demands. Meanwhile, Trump doubled down in rallies, using Canada's brief surcharge threat as political ammunition. They tried to cut our power, and now I'm telling you, we're done with them. Behind closed doors, however, American grid regulators were scrambling. The U.S. electricity network, fragmented across eastern, western, and Texas interconnections, is ill-equipped to absorb shocks. And Canada isn't just a supplier of energy, it's a stabilizer of the grid. Its hydroelectric exports smooth out U.S. demand curves, especially during summer peaks. The National Association of Manufacturers issued a quiet memo warning of multi-sectoral vulnerabilities if Canadian energy cooperation continued to degrade. The Chamber of Commerce urged a diplomatic reset. Yet no side wanted to blink. Canada saw this moment as a once-in-a-generation chance to assert itself. The U.S. saw political capital in confrontation. It's a classic case of mutually assured disruption, and neither side can reach for the switch without consequences. In the small town of Timmins, Ontario, a community that once thrived on gold mining, a new identity had formed around renewable energy. For years, Timmins Hydrotech supplied surplus electricity to the northeastern U.S. through a complex web of interprovincial and international grid connections. The 25% surcharge, even though suspended within 24 hours, sent a chilling message to the company's investors and partners. "We lost $1.2 million in projected revenue overnight," said CEO Elena Brassard, "not because of an outage, but because of uncertainty. Ontario's electricity exports aren't just a provincial resource, they are a national revenue stream. In 2024, Canada earned over 3.5 billion Canadian dollars from cross-border electricity sales. That money-funded infrastructure, public health, and climate transition programs across provinces. The sudden threat of surcharge retaliation and the international spotlight that followed forced investors to reevaluate the long-term risk of relying on U.S. demand. As confidence wavered, new questions emerged. What if the surcharge is reimposed? What if the U.S. imposes export caps or withdraws permits altogether? The ripple effect reached further. In Quebec, the Crown utility Hydro-Quebec reported stalled negotiations with several U.S. states following the March flare-up. And in Manitoba, plans for expanding hydro exports to the Midwest were paused as analysts downgraded their projected returns under the new risk environment. The political shift under Mark Carney's leadership added to the sense of transition. His global pivot strategy, focusing on Asian and European energy partners, means funds are now being rerouted to build long-distance transmission lines and undersea cables to new markets. It's an ambitious realignment, but one that will take years. Until then, towns like Timmins are in limbo, too valuable to abandon, too exposed to rely solely on a volatile American partner. Just across the border in Michigan, the city of Battle Creek is home to a major steel reprocessing facility that supplies components to both domestic automakers and Canadian manufacturers. After Trump's tariffs hit and the retaliatory energy surcharge was announced, plant manager Alan Kreutzer saw his margins squeezed from both ends. "Steel went up 30% within 2 months," Kreutzer said. "Then we started getting hit with surging electricity costs from our Canadian suppliers. By May, we were looking at layoffs." While Ontario never followed through with a full electricity shutdown, the threat alone sent wholesale markets into disarray. The Mid-Continent Independent System Operator, MISO, which manages energy distribution across the Midwest, had to scramble to stabilize rates. Analysts from Utility Dive reported price spikes of 8 to 15% in short-term contracts. For consumers, that translated into monthly bills rising by 100 Canadian dollars or more in some regions of New York and Minnesota. It wasn't just households that paid the price. Data centers operating out of northern hubs, chosen specifically for proximity to Canadian hydro, began shifting load to less efficient domestic grids, increasing their operating costs. Some resorted to backup generators, burning diesel to keep systems online. The irony wasn't lost on critics of the tariffs. America's push for energy independence had triggered a reliance on fossil fallback. Cold storage companies and food manufacturers were next to feel the pressure. In upstate New York, a cooperative that distributes fresh produce across 5 states reported losing 275,000 Canadian dollars in 3 weeks due to energy cost fluctuations. Some of that produce never made it to the shelves, rotting in warehouses as chillers failed to meet efficiency demands. The economic toll was most acute in border states, the very states Trump sought to protect. And while his administration claimed the tariffs were reviving American industry, for many working-class voters, it felt more like a self-inflicted wound. The wires are still humming. Power continues to flow, for now. But the illusion of a seamless, unbreakable energy partnership between the U.S. and Canada has been shattered. What was once an unspoken understanding has become a fragile truce, one that could fracture again with the next political tremor. Both countries now face a reckoning. Canada is looking east and west for new partners, investing in its independence. The U.S. is tightening its grip on old industries, risking the stability of systems it long took for granted. Neither side is wrong, but both are vulnerable. So the question lingers over the border like a thundercloud waiting to burst. How long can you weaponize electricity before someone pulls the plug? If you found this story thought-provoking, like the video, leave a comment with your thoughts. And don't forget to subscribe to the channel for more deep dives into the economics shaping our world.